Good morning, and thank you for attending Police Headquarters. My name is Constable Carolyn DeClute, and I am here today to introduce Detective Sergeant Jim Gotell of 42 Division. He will be providing an update on an attempt murder investigation from McCowan Road and Alton Tower Circle area.
Good morning. This morning, I'm going to update you on an investigation that happened on June the 14th in the area of McCowan Road and Alton Tower Circle. At about 5 p.m. on June 14th, a number of people, young children, were playing in a playground in this area. A vehicle entered the area, 2 men got out of the vehicle and approached the playground. Also in the playground was a gentleman who was there with his young child. The 2 men who had come in the vehicle had handguns, and they began to shoot these handguns into the park. At least 10 rounds were fired into the park by these 2 men. The attendant victim of the shooting, who was there with his child, ran away from the park. Unfortunately, 2 of the bullets hit 2 girls that were in the park. One of these girls was aged 9 and the other girl was aged 5. The 9-year-old girl received a gunshot wound to her leg, just above her ankle, while the 5-year-old girl received a gunshot wound to her abdomen. We received a number of 911 calls for the shooting, and Toronto Police, Toronto Fire, and Toronto Ambulance all attended the area. We believed initially that the injuries to the 5-year-old girl were life-threatening, and the 2 girls were transported to the hospital for sick children in Toronto by an emergency run. Both of the girls have undergone several surgeries in order to repair the damage caused by the bullets. And I'm happy to say at this point in time that both girls are now home and they are doing well. I also want to note that there are other victims in this shooting that we haven't talked about before, and that would be the other children that were in the playground. We believe there were at least 11 children in the playground at the time the gunfire happened, and police have spoken to many of these children and their families. We've been told that a lot of these children are suffering from nightmares, and they don't want to go back to the parks that they were playing in before this. So we also consider these children to be victims in this. Unfortunately, we don't believe we've spoken to all the children that were in the park that day. If there are any other children that haven't spoken to police yet, we're asking that their parents or families contact 42 Division and speak to us. We would be able to arrange for these children the appropriate counseling services that their children may require as a result of this. So again, if there's any families that have not spoken to police yet and their children are in the park, we're please asking you to contact 42 Division. The family of these 2 young girls have asked me to express their thanks for the support and encouragement they have received to members of their community and to the people of the City of Toronto. They're also asking that the media respect their privacy. Detectives from 42 Division have been working tirelessly on this investigation for the past 2 weeks. We were able to locate the vehicle that the men approached this park in the morning after the shooting on June 15th. So about 18 hours after the shooting, we located the vehicle in Pickering in the area of Highway 2 and Liverpool Road. At that time, a person was driving the vehicle. He was arrested by police and the vehicle was seized. Search warrants were executed on the vehicle and forensic material was seized from the vehicle. The gentleman who was driving the vehicle at the time has been identified as Sheldon Area, and he was arrested and he was subsequently charged with attempted murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, discharging a firearm recklessly, possession of a Schedule I substance for the purpose of trafficking, and possession of the proceeds of crime. Sheldon Area remains in custody. By Sunday after the shooting on June 17th, police had identified 2 other people who were wanted in connection with the shooting. The 2 other gentlemen that we identified were T'Quan Robertson, 23, of the City of Toronto, and he has now been charged with the offenses of attempted murder, aggravated assault, 2 counts, discharging a firearm recklessly, unauthorized possession of a firearm in a motor vehicle, unauthorized possession of a firearm, possession of a prohibited firearm, knowing its possession is unauthorized, conspiracy to commit murder, and discharging a prohibited firearm. Also charged is Tarrick Rhoden, 23, of the City of Toronto, and he has been charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, 2 counts, unauthorized possession of a firearm in a motor vehicle, discharging a restricted firearm, unauthorized possession of a firearm, possession of a prohibited firearm knowing its possession is unauthorized, and conspiracy to commit murder. Toronto Police has obtained Canada-wide warrants for both of these individuals, and we have been looking for them for the past 2 weeks. We believe that at this point in time, Rhoden and Robertson are still in the Toronto area and are being helped by friends or associates to evade arrest. The Toronto Police Service would like to caution members of the public that anybody who provides assistance to Mr. Robertson or Mr. Rhoden may be guilty of an offense called accessory after the fact, and this offense is punishable by up to 14 years in jail. So again, anybody offering assistance to Mr. Rhoden or Mr. Robertson may be arrested and charged in connection with that assistance. That is all the information that I have to update at this point in time, and I'll take any questions that you have.
Did you say, was Mr. Oria, was he charged with the conspiracy to commit murder as well?
He was not at this point in time.
Can you explain the discrepancy between him and the other two?
At this point in time, Mr. Oria has been charged and has been arrested. We're still trying to arrest Mr. Robertson and Mr. Rhoden. At some point in time, we anticipate all 3 will be arrested. The matter will be back before a Crown, and we'll probably lay more charges in relation to Mr. Oria and to Mr. Robertson and Mr. Rhoden. That charge list I don't think is complete at this point in time.
Who do you believe the shooters were?
I'm not going to discuss who was involved in doing what at this point in time. All 3 are jointly charged in relation to the shooting.
You found the target?
No, we are still looking for the intended target of the shooting. We know who he is, and we have been looking for him for the past 2 weeks. We have encouraged him in the past to come forward and to speak to police about this. We're actively searching for this gentleman as well, so we're hoping to find him. And again, initially we were obviously concerned about his well-being. We wanted to make sure that he hadn't been shot in this. So after 2 weeks, we do not believe he's been injured. However, we still would like to speak to him because he might be able to provide us information on what the motive may have been for the shooting, or he may be able to provide us with information as to where these 2 people might be.
What makes you think he hasn't been injured? Like, have you been able to reach out to people that you know have seen him, have had contact with them?
We've done that, and we've also been checking hospitals, et cetera, for people coming forward with gunshot wounds. So no one's been reported with a gunshot wound that could possibly be him.
Have you talked to people who have been in touch with these 2 men that, like, or as far as you know, are they just ghosts? Like, nobody has seen them, or you know that people have seen them? You know that there's people that know where they are or where they've been?
I think it's fair to say that after the shooting, people have spoken to both Mr. Rhoden and Mr. Robertson.
Is there any geography associated with these 2 for an area they might have operated out of before?
No, we would expect them. They have operated in Scarborough, Pickering. However, we believe they could be anywhere in the Greater Toronto area at this point in time. And I'm also going to say that we have enlarged our search area in order to be an abundance of caution. We've notified pretty much every police service we can think of in Canada, RCMP, major police forces, minor police forces. I think it's our goal, or my goal anyway, to have the picture of these 2 gentlemen in the hands of every police officer in Canada, so no matter where they go, that the police will be looking for them. As well, we'd like to have every member of the public in Canada aware of what these 2 men look like, so that they could call police if they're seen.
What have you learned in terms of why this shooting happened?
Again, I don't want to discuss motives at this point in time.
How are the girls doing?
The girls are doing well. Again, both are now home from hospital. They've undergone several surgeries each in order to repair the damage, but they seem to be doing fairly well.
Expecting to make a full recovery?
They are, yes.
How's the family doing?
Family seems to be doing quite well. I mean, as well as can be expected under the circumstances. They've received a lot of support. Again, we continue to support them from the police, and I think they're being supported by members of their community as well.
You're going to talk to the children just to try to help?
I beg your pardon?
We're looking to talk to the other children?
Yeah, we are, and that's it. Again, if there's other children that were there and they haven't spoken to me, like the City of Toronto crisis teams went into the neighborhood after the shooting, and they were there to provide support, and maybe some of these children were not able to speak to those workers when they came to the area. So if that didn't happen, and a member of the family would like to have their child speak to somebody to help them if they're having any issues as a result of having been there, they can contact police and we can arrange that for them.
Are you also looking to talk to them for investigative purposes?
We are, and if they don't want to talk to us for investigative purposes, we understand that. We're still willing to provide the outreach support that we can.
You've talked to some of the children that were there?
We have, yes.
But not all?
We don't believe we've talked to all of them.
How many parents were there at the time?
it's very difficult to say at this point in time. There was a few. That's about all I can say. That we've spoken to, yes.
Do you have security?
Yeah,
video?
I'm sorry.
Can you describe from what you guys have gathered from surveillance video in the area, like just what the scene looked like after these shots were fired? Can you describe the terror of the children? What is seen, like, what were they doing after the shots were fired?
Again, I don't want to go into too much detail on that because this matters before the courts, but what I will say is obviously after the shots rang out that there was a great deal of chaos and confusion on behalf of the children that were there. They started to run away from the area where the gunfire was happening. They all appeared to be very scared. So,
Was it quick?
yeah, it was very quick.
Detective, are you saying that there was 2 guns that were used and there was 2 people shooting in that playground?
I am.
So this is not just a case of one killer who doesn't care about children in a playground. This was 2 people
Yeah,
that
we are-
drove there on purpose to fire guns into a playground.
We are alleging that there were 3 people involved in the shooting, that one of the 3 people drove a vehicle to the scene, and that inside the vehicle were 2 men. We are alleging that 2 men got out of the vehicle, both of them were armed with handguns, and both of them fired into the playground.
Are these 2 known to police?
I don't want to comment on that.
Are you aware of a video that seems to be an interview on YouTube of one of the suspects? Or have you done any sort of online research? Into,
Yes, we have.
Can you tell me about how that's playing a role in this investigation? If it is?
I mean, obviously, if you're speaking of a video that was done on June 13th, I don't know if you know that or not.
Yeah,
So the day before the incident, yeah, we've watched that video, and obviously, the comments of the gentleman, it helps us out with, who his associates may be, what his lifestyle patterns are. So everything's good. We have a lot of police officers that are looking for these 2 guys actively right now.
What would your message be to these 2 guys? I mean, their faces have been splashed everywhere for a while. How long can they really stand or walk or wherever they are? Like, what would you say to these guys?
Again, what I've said for the past 2 weeks, contact a lawyer, have your lawyer contact police, and surrender yourself. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to find these guys, so I'm encouraging them to come forward and to surrender to police.
Is it surprising that you haven't caught the guys yet, just given it's been 2 weeks? Or?
Yeah, I think that we've been working very hard on it. We've been watching a lot of places. I think these gentlemen would probably agree with me to say that we've been putting a lot of pressure on places that they frequent, people that they know. So we have been looking very hard for them, and they know that we're looking very hard for them.
Any indications related to gangs?
No, I don't want to discuss that at this point in time.
Detective, the vehicle that was recovered, was that a stolen vehicle or was it a vehicle owned by one of these suspects?
Neither. It was a vehicle that was being rented by one of the suspects.
By a rehab?
I don't want to say.
When you said they operated out of certain areas, what do you mean by that?
Sorry? Where they,
You said that these guys have operated out of?
they're known to frequent certain areas, one of them being Scarborough. Obviously downtown, the different areas of the Greater Toronto Area. But we expect they're someplace in the Greater Toronto Area right now.
Detective, do you have any comment on the fact these were 2 automatic handguns, I assume, that were used here that left shells that these guys fired into? We just saw 60 gun seized in the last little while. Do you have any comment about the number of these firearms that we're seeing and how the police are going to cope with this? Or how are the men and women out on the front lines dealing with the fact that this sort of firepower is out there with these sort of people who don't really care about who they kill?
Obviously, we're concerned about guns on the street. The 2 guns that were used in the shooting have not been recovered, so they still are out there, and the potential does exist for these guns to be used again. And again, that's why I'm concerned that both Mr. Robertson and Mr. Rhoden may be armed and are dangerous, and they may pose a threat to either law enforcement who try to arrest them or other members of the public who might inadvertently get into their way. So I'm asking if anybody recognizes these people to please contact Toronto Police, 42 Division, or Crime Stoppers. And one thing I would like to say is that we've had a lot of support from the community on this investigation. I'm very happy with the information that I have received from members of the community, and I do want to thank everybody who has supplied any information to the Toronto Police that's helped out with this investigation.
Are you getting a feeling from members of the community who may have otherwise not cooperated with the shooting investigation, this one crossed a line and we all want to come together to get these guys? Like, or do you notice a difference in this investigation compared to other shootings?
I would say in this investigation we are getting a lot of support, and I would say, it's hard to say, maybe your comments are fair. I actually had somebody who said in a letter to police that normally they wouldn't contact police with information about a shooting like this, but, quote, this one crossed a line, end quote. So we are getting a lot of information on this, and we're very grateful for the information that we are getting.
Detective, I know that it's generally now you guys don't speak too much about what the histories, the associations of these people are, but we're seeing now from that Project Patent that went down the other day, that many of those people were already up before the courts that are out on bail or parole and those sort of things. I know the chief has expressed concerns about catch and release justice, that we get these bad guys, the police arrest them, they go in, then they're back out doing this. Is there any history of these people being before the courts right now or in the court's jurisdiction that you're able to speak about?
No, I'm not able to speak about any histories at this point in time because I don't want to prejudice any investigation or any court charges that are potentially going to occur down the road. So at this point in time, I'm not going to comment on that. I'm sorry.
Any other questions?
Good, thank you very much.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for attending. There is a post-news release with the photos out that should go out shortly.